In preparation for great power competition with Russia and China, the U.S. Army is planning to retire its signature aircrafts like the Apache and Black Hawk and replace them with the next generation of helicopters. This new initiative is called Future Vertical Lift. Today is the first part of our series on Army modernization, sponsored in part by SAIC, CACI, and General Dynamics. Joining me is Major General Walter Rugen. He is director of the U.S. Army's Future Vertical Lift cross-functional team, and Brigadier General Robert Barrie. He is Program Executive Officer of Aviation at the U.S. Army. Gentlemen, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Mimi.
General Rugen, I want to start with you. Why do we need this program? What's wrong with the helicopters we have right now?
Well, the helicopters we have right now originally were designed in the 1960s in an analog era, and we really need to get it into the digital age with our fleets. We're running out of size, weight, and power capabilities within the footprint of our current fleet. But more importantly, too, is we need to be able to transform the future battlefield geometry. And what I mean by that is both physical, you've seen that with our advanced rotorcraft configurations. We can go faster and farther, but it's also in the electromagnetic spectrum. We want to go faster and farther, and temporally. This ability to crank up the tempo against any adversary is very, very important. And we're looking across that to transform Army aviation to fight peer and near-peer threats.
And General, will they only be used against great powers, or will they also be used for counterinsurgency, counterterrorism?
Well, that's the great thing, really about vertical lift, is it's flexible across the spectrum of conflict. We always have been the force of choice, no matter if it was a great power competition, large-scale combat op, or anything from, helping in a disaster relief. In that entire spectrum, vertical lift, because we're not tied to a runway or a ship port, we remain, the COCOM commander's flexible choice to take care of multiple missions.
And how will these new aircraft be transformational to Army aviation?
We've flown some advanced rotorcraft configurations, and we're very much into prototyping and fly before we buy. These advanced configurations are giving us transformational speed and range, and we want that speed and range to be able to operate in our pacing theater, which is Indo-PACOM. We need that, what we call reach, the ability to reach and bring effects at the long distances of Indo-PACOM. But we also want decision dominance. And that decision dominance will allow us to find and fix, things that are hunting us or our pacing threats, or high payoff threats, and finish them. But more importantly, we want, low latency at that X, at that strike environment, and be able to, again, very quickly either exploit that success or reattack if we weren't successful on our first strike or assault.
And General Barrie, I want to ask you about pilot training. How extensive will that training be? Are these new aircraft much more difficult to fly than the ones they're replacing?
Certainly, yeah. Along the way, we have been developing, since the initiation of these requirements, ways that will transform not just our the capabilities that General Rugen had mentioned, but also how we train our aviators. And a critical portion of that, as you mentioned, is the pilot training. But I'd be quick to say it's not just the pilot training. We're looking comprehensively across the way we maintain our platform, the way we track data and use data, as well as how we do the pilot training. And in all cases, I think specifically you had asked, is it going to be more challenging? We see technology enabling us to train in a significantly more relevant environment and to bring to bear all of these technologies to better align our pilot training with our maintainer training, and then connect data across the spectrum. So we believe, although we will be operating in new environments with new capabilities, that technology that we can bring to bear will help, again, across the spectrum of training as we bring these new capabilities to the Army.
And General Barrie, just staying with you, there's ever-tightening budgets. Are you facing difficult decisions on how to fund and maintain these new aircraft?
So that's always going to be a challenge. I would say here inside Program Executive Office Aviation, we work across the enterprise in making sure that as we design, develop, deliver, and then support these systems, that we do so with an understanding of affordability. It's at the forefront of every decision that we make. And we have three objectives here inside the program executive office. The first is delivering on those future vertical lift capabilities, the ones that General Rugen mentioned. And no doubt our top priority for all of our workforce here in PU Aviation is accomplishing delivery of those systems for our future fleet. The next is on our enduring fleet of aircraft, the fleet that we have in existence today, maintaining readiness and relevance of that fleet. And then the third is, while we're doing that in both future development as well as maintaining our enduring fleet, that we build partner capacity around the world. So those three objectives all have affordability at the center of what we do. So it's a fair question. It's something that inside the aviation enterprise we consider every day, and in every decision we make is affordability and how we're going to maintain those three objectives across the enterprise while we modernize.
You mentioned building partner capacity. Can you drill down a little bit on that and what that really means?
Certainly, yeah. So partner capacity we look at as our friends and allies around the world who we share common values with. We look as we build capability to find ways that maintain interoperability with our international partners and allies to bring them along with us and to ensure that they have the ability to procure and then field systems that we have inside our formation. An objective there, obviously, in a future battlefield to ensure that we're able to communicate and execute our missions in a comprehensive way. And we have an ancillary benefit of inside our industrial base, increasing the volume of systems as we procure them to have our international partners doing that with us. So it's something we are dedicated to. We do that in conjunction with General Rugen and the Future Vertical Lift cross-functional team on our future fleet, as well as all of our systems in the enduring fleet. So it's something that's intricately tied into all of our missions that we execute inside the program executive office.
And General Rugen, what are some of the challenges that you have faced and are facing currently with the Future Vertical Lift program?
No, great question. And I think we started off really looking back to what we saw coming out of the Crimea and the Donbass in 2014. And we saw a number of things that the Russians did to Ukraine, and we saw a number of gaps. And we wanted to close those gaps for any future force. And we've been studying it very in-depth since that 2014 event in the Crimea, and that's really what woke us up. I think as we talked about the capability we need to fight and win, everything that we've done has been focused on closing those gaps. And so multiple studies that fed into prototyping, that fed into our modeling and sim. We've done over 100,000 engineered runs in a high-fidelity physics-based model to fight the fight over and over and over to ensure that what we're building is actually going to be effective in our pacing theaters against these peer threats. And I think once we got finished with that, we took it out to our Western test ranges. We've been out there for 3 years in a row to fly in relevant environments against these threats and make sure that, again, what we were putting in our requirements document is something that's going to be very effective in the fight. And we'll be heading out to Project Convergence 21, both at White Sands Missile Range and at Yuma Proving Ground this October and November to follow up on the work we just finished up in May at Dugway, again, against live threat emitters. You know, we very much want to fly before we buy, and we're mindful of our past programmatic and acquisition failures. And so this prototyping effort is very, very central to what the Army wants to do and what Army Aviation wants to do. I think you were right to ask the question earlier about budgets. I would state that we've studied our budget in the tail, our operational and sustainment costs, well over 25 times with external organizations to get a good red team to make sure that we don't grab a hold of a capability that the Army can't afford. And to date, we've done the requirement trades to make sure that we maintain our budgets and we maintain something that is affordable but also effective. I think, again, when you look at the inflection point we're at currently, We are much more like the 1970s in Army aviation coming out of Vietnam, where our current fleets are modernized, than we were in the 1990s coming out of Desert Storm. And so we have a very much leaner and cleaner portfolio. We're buying out the Apache Echo model. We're buying out the Mike model Black Hawk this decade. And that inflection point allows us to jump to the future. And so it gives us that budgetary headspace. And that's just not me or the Army saying that, but the Congressional Budget Office saw that and said the same thing, is that we're at a very great inflection point to jump to the future.
And General Barrie, sorry, General, to cut you off, but I wanted to ask General Barrie about timelines. When will the first aircraft be deployed to the battlefield, and are you confident that you can get them there on time?
We are, yeah. I think I want to just tag on to what General Rugen was saying about the upfront portion. In many cases, the things we are doing early in the program are going to help us avoid many of the pitfalls we've had on developmental programs in the past. And specifically, that's making sure that the requirements in the upfront portion of the program both satisfy a capability that the Army needs and are also achievable from industry's perspective. So these multiple iterations that we're doing, both through demonstrations as well as actual development of prototypes and flying before we buy, as General Rugen mentioned, that's going to enable some of these aggressive timelines that we are still attempting to achieve. And to specifically answer your question, by the end of this decade, right, by the 2030, we are going to field these platforms, these future vertical lift capabilities, and in some cases, well before that, on the unmanned side, begin to get these in soldiers' hands and shape this capability, this desired future capability that the Army has.
All right. Well, gentlemen, thank you both so much for joining us and sharing that with us.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Our Army Modernization Series is sponsored in part by SAIC, CACI, and General Dynamics.